In the opulent heights of Dubai's Burj Al Arab Hotel, Sheikh Khalid Al Fahim gazed out at the sprawling cityscape below, his reflection in the floor-to-ceiling windows revealing a man whose authority was as unmistakable as the crisp lines of his custom-tailored thobe. The setting sun cast golden rays across the Persian Gulf, but Khalid's thoughts were far from the breathtaking view. At 42, he had built an empire that stretched across continents, yet something essential eluded him, something that all his billions couldn't buy. Another successful quarter, I presume. The voice belonged to Hassan al-Rashid, one of the few people Khalid considered a true friend rather than just another business associate. Hassan settled into one of the suite's plush armchairs, his casual demeanor a stark contrast to Khalid's rigid posture. "The numbers speak for themselves," Khalid replied, finally turning away from the window. "The new development in Singapore exceeded projections by 30%. He spoke with the detached confidence of someone who had never known failure. In business, even as personal failures haunted his private moments. Hassan nodded, but there was a glint in his eye that Khalid knew all too well. "Numbers, always numbers with you, my friend. When was the last time you did something truly challenging? Something that wasn't about profit margins or market shares?" The question hung in the air, and Khalid felt a familiar irritation rising. "I suppose you have something specific in mind." He kept his tone neutral, but there was an edge to it that would have made most men reconsider their next words. Hassan, however, was not most men. "As a matter of fact, I do." Hassan leaned forward, his expression serious. "You've mastered the art of turning companies around, but what about people? Real transformation. That's a challenge worthy of your talents." Khalid's eyebrow arched slightly. "You're speaking in riddles, Hassan. What exactly are you proposing?" "A wager," Hassan said, his eyes twinkling. 2 million dinars says you can't take someone from outside our social circle, someone society would consider disadvantaged, and transform them into a respected member of Dubai's elite within 3 months. "You can't be serious," Khalid scoffed, but Hassan wasn't finished. "To make it interesting, I've already selected the candidate." He pulled out his tablet and pulled up a photograph. Layla Morrison, 28, American. A former dancer who lost the use of her legs 5 years ago. Brilliant mind, but working as a virtual assistant to make ends meet. Transform her into someone who can navigate our world with grace, someone who could stand beside you as an equal in any social setting. Khalid studied the photograph. The young woman was undeniably beautiful, with fierce intelligence in her dark eyes, but her wheelchair was prominent in the image. "You expect me to marry someone in a wheelchair? The family would never accept it." "Exactly why it's a true challenge," Hassan pressed. "Prove that you can see beyond surface appearances, that you can recognize and cultivate true worth. Unless, of course, you think it's beyond your capabilities." The subtle challenge in Hassan's voice struck a nerve. Khalid had built his reputation on doing what others claimed was impossible. "And how do you propose I explain this arrangement to her? I doubt she'd agree to be part of some wager." "Present it as an opportunity," Hassan suggested. "A chance for her to access resources and connections she could never dream of otherwise. A business arrangement, if you will, with mutual benefits." Khalid found himself considering it seriously. The idea was preposterous, yet something about it called to him. Perhaps it was the challenge itself, or perhaps it was the chance to prove something to himself and his family. They had never fully approved of his single-minded focus on business. His refusal to remarry after his brief first marriage ended in divorce. 3 months, he mused aloud, and the criteria for success. "She must be accepted by the highest circles of our society," Hassan detailed. "Able to converse fluently in Arabic, display impeccable etiquette, and understand the nuances of our culture. Most importantly, she must earn genuine respect, not just polite tolerance." Khalid walked to his desk, picked up his crystal glass, and took a thoughtful sip of water. The city lights were beginning to twinkle beyond the windows, a reminder of all he had built from nothing. "Draw up the terms," he said finally. "But I want 3 conditions of my own." Hassan's smile widened. "Name them." "First, she must agree to this arrangement of her own free will. Second, the wager remains strictly between us. And third, Khalid paused, his expression hardening. If I succeed, you'll finally stop these attempts to fix my personal life. Agreed, Hassan said, extending his hand, though I suspect this challenge may do exactly that, whether you intend it to or not. As they shook hands, Khalid couldn't shake the feeling that he was setting something in motion that would change far more than just his bank balance. The photograph of Layla still glowed on Hassan's tablet, her eyes seeming to challenge him directly. It would be an interesting 3 months, if nothing else. Layla Morrison's small apartment in downtown Los Angeles was a far cry from the luxurious hotel suite where her fate had just been decided. The morning sun filtered through sheer curtains, illuminating a space that, while modest, radiated warmth and creativity. Photographs of dance performances lined the walls, memories of a different life, yet Layla refused to take them down. They weren't reminders of what she'd lost, but of who she was at her core. The familiar ping of an incoming video call interrupted her morning routine. Expecting another virtual assistant client, she wheeled herself to her organized desk setup. The name on the screen, however, made her pause. Hassan Al-Rashid International Holdings. She quickly checked her appearance in the monitor's reflection, smoothed her dark hair, and accepted the call. "Good morning, Ms. Morrison." The distinguished-looking man on her screen spoke with cultured precision. "I'm Hassan Al-Rashid. I hope I'm not interrupting your morning." "Not at all, Mr. Al-Rashid," Layla replied professionally, though her mind raced with questions. She had never received a direct call from someone at this level of business before. "How can I help you today?" "I have a rather unique proposition for you," Hassan began, his expression both serious and slightly amused. "One that could change your life significantly if you're interested in a challenge." Layla's guard immediately went up, but curiosity won out. "I'm listening. What would you say to spending 3 months in Dubai, all expenses paid, with the opportunity to immerse yourself in Arab culture and society at the highest levels?" A startled laugh escaped her. "I'd say it sounds too good to be true. What's the catch?" Hassan's smile widened. "Direct and perceptive. Excellent qualities. The position would require you to marry Sheikh Khalid Al-Fahim." Layla's fingers gripped her armrest tightly. "I'm sorry, did you say marry?" "A temporary arrangement, of course," Hassan clarified quickly. "Though the sheikh is prepared to make it worth your while. Let's say $500,000, regardless of the outcome." Layla's mind whirled. That kind of money could change everything. Proper medical care, a more accessible living space, seed funding for the dance therapy program she'd been dreaming of starting. But marriage? To a sheikh she'd never met. "Why me?" she asked finally. "And why would a sheikh agree to marry someone in a wheelchair?" "Because you're exactly what he needs, though he doesn't know it yet," Hassan replied cryptically. "As for your wheelchair, we see it as an asset, not a liability. You've faced challenges that have given you strength of character, something sorely needed in our social circles." Layla wheeled herself to the window, looking out at the city she'd called home since the accident. "And what exactly would be expected of me during these 3 months?" "You would learn Arabic, study our customs and etiquette, and integrate yourself into Dubai's elite social circle. Think of it as a role in the performance of a lifetime." Hassan knew about her dancing background, she realized. He'd done his homework. "And Sheikh Khalid, what's he like?" "Brilliant in business, traditional in values, and—" Hassan paused diplomatically. "Somewhat set in his ways, but he's a man of honor who keeps his word." Layla turned back to the screen. "I'd need guarantees, legal documents ensuring my safety and the promised payment, and I'd need to know that my medical needs would be properly accommodated." "Of course. The Sheikh's palace is already being fitted with all necessary modifications. You would have access to the best medical care in Dubai, and a legal contract will be drawn up to your specifications." She should say no. It was crazy, potentially. Dangerous and definitely unconventional. But something in her sparked at the challenge. Since the accident, she'd fought against being defined by her wheelchair. Here was a chance to prove, on a grand scale, that she was more than her disability. "I have one more condition," she said firmly. "I want to be able to leave at any time if I feel uncomfortable or unsafe, with a proportional payment for the time spent." "Agreed," Hassan nodded approvingly. Shall I have the contracts drawn up? Layla took a deep breath, her heart racing with a familiar pre-performance anticipation. Yes, but I want to meet Sheikh Khalid first, via video call. I won't sign anything until I've spoken with him directly. A wise precaution. I'll arrange it for tomorrow. Hassan's expression softened slightly. You know, Ms. Morrison, I have a feeling you're going to surprise everyone, including yourself. After the call ended, Layla sat in silence, wondering if she'd just made the biggest mistake of her life or opened the door to her greatest adventure. The morning sun caught one of her dance photos, highlighting a moment when she'd been suspended in mid-leap, defying gravity. She smiled at the memory. She might not be able to dance anymore, but she hadn't lost her ability to take bold chances. This would just be a different kind of performance, on a much bigger stage. The video call connection crackled to life on the massive screen in Khalid's private office, and for a moment he found himself caught off guard. The woman before him carried herself with an unexpected dignity, her posture elegant despite being seated in a wheelchair. Her dark hair was pulled back professionally, and her eyes met his through the screen with unwavering confidence. Ms. Morrison, Khalid began formally, I trust Hassan has explained the basic parameters of our potential arrangement. He has, Sheikh Al-Fahim, Layla replied, her voice clear and steady, though I admit I'm curious about your motivations for such an unconventional proposal. Khalid leaned back in his chair, studying her carefully. Most people he dealt with were either overly deferential or trying to hide their intimidation behind false bravado. She displayed neither trait. My motivations are straightforward, he said smoothly. I require a wife who can adapt to our society and represent my family's interests appropriately. Hassan suggested you might be suitable despite your... He paused, choosing his words carefully. Unique circumstances. A slight smile played at the corners of Layla's mouth. You mean, despite my wheelchair? Sheikh Al-Fahim, if we're going to proceed with this arrangement, I'd prefer direct honesty. My disability is part of who I am, but it doesn't define me. The directness of her response surprised him. Very well. Yes, your wheelchair presents certain challenges in our society. However, I'm told you possess other qualities that may compensate for this limitation. Compensate? Layla's eyebrow arched slightly. Sheikh Al-Fahim, I don't need to compensate for anything. I bring my own strengths to the table. The question is whether you're prepared to look past your preconceptions to recognize them. For the first time in years, Khalid found himself momentarily speechless. This was not proceeding as he had expected. Where was the grateful acceptance he had anticipated? The eager compliance. You understand that if we proceed, you will be expected to learn our ways. He recovered quickly. Our language, our customs, our traditions. Of course, she nodded. And you understand that I expect to be treated with respect, not as a charity case or a project to be managed. Hassan, who had been silently observing the exchange, couldn't quite hide his amused smile. Khalid shot him a warning glance before returning his attention to the screen. I've had my legal team prepare a contract, Khalid stated, changing tactics. It outlines all terms, including the financial compensation, healthcare provisions, and your right to withdraw if you feel uncomfortable. I'll have my lawyer review it, Layla replied promptly. I assume there's a confidentiality clause. Naturally. Though I'm curious, what are your concerns about confidentiality? Layla's expression softened slightly. Sheikh Al-Fahim, I'm not naive. This arrangement, however temporary, will attract attention. I want to ensure that any publicity serves both our interests, not just yours. Khalid found himself nodding appreciatively despite himself. She was proving to be more shrewd than he had anticipated. A reasonable precaution. You'll find the terms generous in that regard. And my accommodations, I have specific needs regarding accessibility. My palace is being modified as we speak. You'll have full access to all necessary areas, and a medical team will be on call. Layla was quiet for a moment, considering. One last question, if I may. Go ahead. Why 3 months? Why not a longer or shorter period? Khalid exchanged a quick glance with Hassan before responding. 3 months should be sufficient to determine if this arrangement can be mutually beneficial. You mean sufficient time to see if I can Be transformed into someone you'd actually consider keeping as a wife. Her insight was uncomfortably accurate. You are very direct, Ms. Morrison. As I said, I prefer honesty. If we're going to do this, let's not pretend it's something it's not. You need a wife for your own reasons, and I need the opportunities this arrangement provides. As long as we're clear about that, I think we can work together effectively. Khalid found himself intrigued, despite his initial reservations. There was a strength in her that he hadn't expected, a clarity of purpose that resonated with his own approach to life. Very well, he said finally. Shall we proceed with the arrangements? Yes, Layla answered, her expression determined. But remember, Sheikh Al-Fahim, you may be offering to transform my life, but don't be surprised if this experience transforms yours as well. As the call ended, Khalid sat back in his chair, troubled by the sensation that he might have underestimated the complexity of what he was undertaking. Beside him, Hassan was grinning openly now. Well, his friend prompted. She's not what I expected, Khalid admitted reluctantly. That, my friend, was rather the point. Now the real challenge begins. The private jet touched down in Dubai, international airport under a blazing afternoon sun. Layla gazed out the window at the shimmering cityscape, her heart pounding with a mixture of excitement and apprehension. The past 2 weeks had been a whirlwind of preparations, medical examinations, legal consultations, and hasty arrangements for her apartment and clients back in Los Angeles. A team of attendants appeared as if by magic the moment the aircraft door opened. They were efficiently professional, helping her transfer from the plane to her wheelchair with practiced ease. Khalid had clearly ensured his staff was properly trained, though he himself was notably absent from the welcoming committee. Instead, she was greeted by an elegant woman in her 40s, dressed in a sophisticated abaya. Welcome to Dubai, Ms. Morrison. I'm Amira, your cultural advisor and personal assistant during your stay with us. Sheikh Al-Fahim sends his apologies. An urgent business matter required his attention. Of course, Layla replied smoothly, though she couldn't help wondering if his absence was deliberate. Please call me Layla. They bypassed the main terminal entirely, whisked through a private entrance where a luxurious wheelchair-accessible van awaited. As they drove through the city, Amira provided a running commentary on the landmarks they passed, but Layla found herself more interested in studying the woman herself. There was an intelligence in Amira's eyes that suggested she was more than just a guide. Sheikh Al-Fahim chose you specifically for this role, didn't he? Layla asked during a lull in the conversation. Amira's slight smile confirmed her suspicion. Very perceptive. Yes, I've worked with the Sheikh's family for many years. I'm here to help you navigate both the practical and social aspects of your new position. You mean to help transform me into someone suitable to be a Sheikh's wife? No, Amira's response was surprisingly firm. I'm here to help you become the best version of yourself within this context. There's a difference. The van turned through an ornate gate, and Layla caught her first glimpse of what would be her home for the next 3 months. The palace was a stunning blend of traditional Arabian architecture and modern luxury, its white marble facades gleaming in the sunlight. However, what caught her attention were the subtle modifications visible even from the entrance. Gently, sloping ramps elegantly integrated into the design, wider doorways that didn't compromise the aesthetic. The renovations were completed yesterday, Amira informed her. The Sheikh was quite insistent that everything be perfect before your arrival. Inside, the palace was even more impressive. High ceilings, intricate geometric patterns, and flowing fountains created an atmosphere of timeless luxury. Yet there was something almost sterile about its perfection, as if it were more of a museum than a home. A small team of staff waited in the grand entrance hall, including a medical professional who introduced herself as Dr. Samira. I'll be overseeing your care during your stay, she explained warmly. We've set up everything according to your medical records, but please don't hesitate to tell us if any adjustments are needed. Layla was shown to her suite, a sprawling collection of rooms that had been meticulously adapted for her needs. The bathroom was state-of-the-art accessible, the closet already filled with a selection of both Western and traditional clothing in her size. Everything was beautiful, convenient, and utterly impersonal. Sheikh Al-Fahim would like to dine with... "You this evening," Amira announced as the staff quietly withdrew. "I've taken the liberty of selecting an appropriate outfit. We have a few hours to prepare." "Prepare?" Layla questioned, wheeling herself to the floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked a stunning garden. "Your first dinner together is important," Amira explained. "It sets the tone for everything that follows. We should review some basic etiquette and dining customs before then." Layla turned from the window to face her new advisor. "Amira, may I ask you something frankly?" "Of course." "What does Sheikh Al-Fahim really expect from all this?" "From me?" Amira was quiet for a moment, choosing her words carefully. "The Sheikh is a complex man. He values control and success above all else, yet there's a part of him that remains unfulfilled. I believe he expects you to be a project he can manage, a challenge he can overcome." "And what do you expect?" A knowing smile crossed Amira's face. "I expect you to surprise him. Now shall we begin your first lesson? We have much to cover before dinner." As they began reviewing proper forms of address and basic Arabic phrases, Layla couldn't shake the feeling that she had stepped into a role far more complicated than she had imagined. The next 3 months would test her in ways she hadn't anticipated, but as she caught her reflection in one of the many ornate mirrors, straight-backed, chin held high, wheelchair and all, she knew she was ready for the challenge. The private dining room of Sheikh Khalid's palace was an intimately lit space where modern luxury met traditional Arabic design. Crystal chandeliers cast a warm glow over the intricate geometric patterns that adorned the walls, while floor to ceiling, windows offered a spectacular view of Dubai's glittering skyline. Layla arrived precisely on time, wearing an elegant navy blue evening dress that Amira had selected, modest yet sophisticated, with subtle golden embroidery that caught the light as she moved. Khalid was already waiting, his traditional white thobe immaculate, his bearing regal as he stood to greet her. For a moment their eyes met and Layla noticed something flicker across his expression, surprise perhaps at how different she looked from their video call. "Ms. Morrison," he greeted her formally. "I trust you're finding everything to your satisfaction." "The accommodations are exceptional," Layla replied, matching his formality as she positioned her wheelchair at the table. "You've been very thorough in the preparations." A server appeared silently, pouring water into crystal glasses. Khalid waited until they were alone before speaking again. "I believe in proper planning. It tends to minimize complications." "And am I a complication, Sheikh Al-Fahim?" Layla asked, her tone light but her gaze direct. The corner of his mouth twitched slightly. "You're a challenge I've chosen to accept." "Interesting choice of words," she observed, taking a sip of water. "Though I wonder if you truly understand what you've accepted." Before Khalid could respond, servers entered with the first course, an elegant arrangement of traditional mezze. Layla noticed how they moved with practiced efficiency, neither hovering nor rushing, though she caught a few curious glances. "Amira has begun your cultural instruction?" Khalid asked, smoothly changing the subject. "Yes, though we've only covered the basics so far. Would you prefer we continue our conversation in Arabic?" She spoke the last sentence in careful, accented Arabic, and had the satisfaction of seeing genuine surprise register on his face. "You've been studying already?" "I started the moment I signed the contract," Layla explained, switching back to English. "I take my commitment seriously, Sheikh Al-Fahim." "Khalid," he corrected her, his tone softening slightly. "If we're to convince others this arrangement is real, you should use my given name, at least in private." Layla nodded, noting the calculated practicality behind the gesture. "Very well, Khalid. Then you should tell me what else you expect from these 3 months, beyond the obvious language and cultural education." He studied her for a moment, his dark eyes unreadable. "I expect you to learn our ways, to conduct yourself with dignity and grace in our social circles, to represent my family's interests appropriately." "And what do you expect from yourself?" The question seemed to catch him off guard. "From myself?" "Yes, this arrangement goes both ways, doesn't it? What are you willing to learn, to change, to understand?" A slight frown creased his brow. "I'm not the one who needs to change, Ms. Morrison. I'm quite satisfied with who I am." "Layla," she corrected gently, and anyone who's truly satisfied doesn't make wagers about transforming other people's lives. The air between them crackled with tension. Khalid set down his fork with deliberate care. You seem to have developed some interesting theories about my motivations. Not theories, observations. You've created this perfect, controlled environment, she gestured to their surroundings, modified it to accommodate my needs with impressive efficiency, yet you've barely looked directly at my wheelchair since I arrived. Why is that? I'm looking at you, not your disability, he replied stiffly. Are you? Or are you looking at a project you can manage, a challenge you can overcome to prove something? To yourself. Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of the main course, a traditional makbous with perfectly spiced lamb. Layla used the break to gather her thoughts, wondering if she'd pushed too hard too soon. But when Khalid spoke again, his tone had changed subtly. You're very direct for someone in your position. My position as your temporary wife, or my position as someone you consider disadvantaged? A hint of amusement flickered in his eyes. Both, perhaps, though I'm beginning to understand why Hassan chose you. Oh? You're not afraid of me, he stated simply. Most people are, you know. They see the wealth, the power, the position. They either cower or try too hard to impress. You do neither. Layla smiled slightly. Should I be afraid of you? No, he answered, and for the first time that evening, his smile seemed genuine. But you might want to be afraid of what the next 3 months will bring. Our society can be challenging for outsiders. I'm familiar with challenges, Khalid. They have a way of revealing who we really are. The rest of dinner passed in a complex dance of conversation, each of them testing the other's boundaries while maintaining a careful civility. As the evening drew to a close, Khalid escorted her back to the entrance of her suite. You should rest, he said. Tomorrow your real training begins. I look forward to it, Layla replied. Then, surprising both of them, she added in Arabic, Good night, Khalid. Thank you for an interesting evening. As she wheeled herself into her suite, she could feel his gaze following her. The evening had confirmed what she'd suspected. Beneath his controlled exterior, Sheikh Khalid Al-Fahim was a man with hidden depths and unacknowledged wounds. The next 3 months would be about more than just her transformation. Whether he realized it or not, they would challenge everything he thought he knew about himself. The following weeks established a rigorous routine that left Layla little time to second-guess her decision. Her days began early with Arabic lessons from a stern but patient instructor who taught at the finest universities in the Middle East. Afternoons were spent with Amira, learning the intricate dance of social etiquette that governed Dubai's elite circles. Everything from proper forms of address to the subtle art of conversation. No, not quite like that, Amira corrected gently one afternoon, adjusting the way Layla's abaya draped over her wheelchair. The fabric should flow naturally, creating an elegant line. Remember, every detail matters in our society. Layla caught her reflection in the mirror, struck by how different she already looked. The traditional garment, far from hiding her wheelchair, seemed to incorporate it into an overall image of grace. It's beautiful, she admitted, but I feel like I'm wearing a costume. All of us wear costumes of some kind, Amira replied wisely. The trick is to find the truth within the role you're playing. Their lessons were occasionally interrupted by the sound of Khalid's voice echoing through the palace halls as he conducted business. Though their interactions remained formal, Layla had begun to notice subtle changes in his behavior. He'd started joining her for breakfast occasionally, asking about her progress in Arabic, even sharing small insights into the business empire he'd built. One morning, she wheeled herself into the palace's vast library to find him already there, absorbed in business documents. He looked up as she entered, and for a moment, she caught a glimpse of fatigue in his eyes before his usual mask of control slipped back into place. Your Arabic is improving, he commented, switching to his native language, though your accent still needs work. Then perhaps you should practice with me more often, she responded in kind, pleased when he nodded approvingly at her grammar. I have a business dinner tonight, he said after a moment's hesitation. Important clients from Singapore. Would you care to join us? Layla's heart skipped a beat. This would be her first public appearance as his wife. Are you sure I'm ready? No, he admitted with unexpected honesty. But there's only so much you can learn in theory. At some point you must test yourself in practice. The dinner was held in one of Dubai's most exclusive restaurants, in a private room with a view of the Burj Khalifa. Layla could feel the curious stares as Khalid guided her wheelchair to their table, but she held her head high, channeling everything she'd learned from Amira. To her surprise, she found herself genuinely enjoying the evening. Her Arabic, while not perfect, was sufficient to follow the conversation, and her background as a virtual assistant had given her an unexpected advantage. She was well versed in international business concepts. During a discussion about a challenging market expansion, she caught an error in the client's proposal that everyone else had missed. "If you'll excuse my interruption," she said carefully in Arabic, "but wouldn't the regulatory requirements in that sector require a different approach?" The table fell silent. Khalid's expression was unreadable, but the lead client, Mr. Chen, leaned forward with interest. "Please elaborate." Drawing on her experience with similar regulations in her previous work, Layla outlined a potential solution. As she spoke, she noticed Khalid watching her with an intensity that made her pulse quicken. Later that night, as they rode back to the palace in comfortable silence, he finally spoke. "You surprised them tonight, all of them, including you." "Yes," he admitted, "though perhaps I should stop being surprised by now." "Why did you really invite me tonight?" Khalid was quiet for a long moment. "I wanted to see how you would handle yourself. If you would—" He paused, choosing his words carefully. "If you would embarrass me." "And did I?" "No," he said softly. "You did quite the opposite." Back at the palace, he insisted on escorting her to her suite himself, dismissing the attendants with a wave. At her door, he hesitated, seeming to struggle with something. "You did tonight," he said finally. "With the regulatory issue, it was impressive. Not many people would have had the courage to speak up in that situation." "Or the knowledge," she suggested, raising an eyebrow. "Or the knowledge," he conceded. "I may have underestimated you, Layla." The use of her first name, spoken with such warmth, sent an unexpected thrill through her. "Good night, Khalid," she said softly, before he could see how much that simple acknowledgement had affected her. As she prepared for bed that night, Layla caught herself humming, an old habit from her dancing days that she'd almost forgotten. The evening had been a small victory, but an important one. She was proving herself capable of navigating this New World wheelchair and all. Yet as she drifted off to sleep, it wasn't the business success that lingered in her mind, but the way Khalid had looked at her across the dinner table, as if seeing her, truly seeing her, for the first time. The grand ballroom of the Jumeirah, Emirates Towers buzzed with the quiet energy of Dubai's elite. It was Layla's first major social event, a charity gala that attracted the city's most influential families. 6 weeks into her stay in Dubai, she had made remarkable progress in both language and etiquette, but tonight would test everything she had learned. Khalid stood beside her wheelchair, his hand resting casually on its handle in a gesture that had become increasingly natural over the past weeks. They made a striking pair, he in his perfectly tailored black bisht over a crisp white thobe, she in a midnight blue abaya embellished with intricate silver embroidery that Amira had specially designed to complement her wheelchair. "Remember," he murmured in Arabic, "my cousin Omar will be here tonight. He can be challenging." "You mean he disapproves of me?" Layla replied in the same language, her accent now barely noticeable. "He disapproves of change in general," Khalid corrected, then added with unexpected warmth, "You'll handle him beautifully as you have everything else." Before Layla could respond to this unusual compliment, they were approached by an elegantly dressed older woman. "Khalid, Habibi," she exclaimed, embracing him before turning curious eyes to Layla. "And this must be your new wife we've heard so much about." "Aunt Jamila," Khalid said formally. "May I present Layla?" Layla inclined her head respectfully, speaking in perfect formal Arabic. "It's an honor to meet you, Aunt Jamila. Khalid has told me wonderful things about you." The older woman's eyes widened slightly at Layla's command of the language. "Well," she said, switching to English with a knowing smile, "it seems the rumors about you are true, my dear. You're full of surprises." The evening progressed smoothly, as Layla navigated conversation after conversation, carefully applying everything Amira had taught her. She could feel curious eyes following her movement through the room, but she had grown accustomed to the attention. What she hadn't expected was the growing warmth in Khalid's gaze whenever she handled a particularly delicate social situation with grace. It was during a quiet moment, when Khalid had stepped away to speak with some business associates, that Omar made his move. He approached her wheelchair with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Cousin Layla," he said smoothly in Arabic, "how kind of you to grace us with your presence. Though I must admit, I'm curious about what attracted you to our dear Khalid. Surely it wasn't his renowned charm." The sarcasm in his tone was subtle but clear. Layla met his gaze steadily. "Actually, it was his honesty," she replied, matching his smooth tone. "He's never pretended to be anything other than what he is. A rare quality, wouldn't you agree?" Omar's smile tightened. "Indeed, though some might say the same about opportunism, it must be challenging, finding opportunities in your condition. No more challenging than finding genuine relationships. In yours," Layla responded sweetly. "At least my limitations are visible, Cousin Omar." A flash of anger crossed his face, but before he could respond, another voice interrupted. "Is everything all right here?" Khalid had returned, his expression neutral, but his eyes hard as he looked at his cousin. Omar's demeanor changed instantly. "Of course. I was just getting to know your charming wife better." He bowed slightly and retreated, but not before shooting Layla a look that made it clear this wasn't over. Later that night, as they rode home in comfortable silence, Khalid suddenly spoke. "For you handled Omar well. You heard. Enough." He paused, then added, "You continue to surprise me, Layla. Is that a good thing?" Khalid was quiet for so long, she thought he wouldn't answer. Finally he said, "I used to think surprises were a sign of poor planning. Now I'm not so sure." When they reached the palace, Khalid insisted on accompanying her to the garden terrace, their usual spot for late-night conversations that had become more frequent over the weeks. The night air was cool, and the garden's fountains provided a peaceful backdrop. "There's something I should tell you," Khalid said suddenly, his voice unusually hesitant, "about why I agreed to this arrangement." Layla waited, sensing this was important. "I had a brother," he continued, staring out at the darkened garden. "Tariq. He was different. Like you, he challenged everything everyone thought they knew about capability and worth. He had a way of seeing through people's pretenses, much like you do." "What happened to him?" Layla asked softly. "An accident. 5 years ago. He was always adventurous, taking risks I thought were foolish." Khalid's voice grew distant. "After that, I decided control was the only way to prevent pain. Business, social obligations, family responsibilities, everything had to be perfectly managed. And then Hassan proposed this arrangement," Layla realized aloud. "Yes." Khalid turned to look at her, his expression vulnerable in a way she'd never seen before. "When he showed me your picture, when he explained about your accident, your wheelchair, I thought this would be my chance to prove something, to show that I could succeed where I had failed before, to protect and guide someone who reminded me of Tariq. But you're not Tariq. You're not someone who needs my protection or guidance. I'm what?" Khalid shook his head, his walls visibly going back up. "It's late. We should both get some rest." As Layla prepared for bed that night, she found herself replaying the evening's events. Omar's veiled threats, Khalid's unexpected confession, the way he'd looked at her in the garden. Something was shifting between them, something neither of them had anticipated. The question was, would Khalid allow it to continue, or would his need for control ultimately drive them apart? The morning sun streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Khalid's home office as Layla wheeled herself in, responding to his unexpected summons. She found him standing by the window, his posture tense, a tablet in his hands. "Have you seen this?" he asked without preamble, holding up the device. On the screen was a popular local blog featuring candid photos from the previous night's gala. The headline read, "Sheikh Al Fahim's American wife a modern fairy tale, or a calculated business move? Layla scanned the article, her heart sinking, as she read the thinly veiled speculation about their marriage. While some comments praised the progressive nature of their union, others questioned its authenticity and suggested less flattering motivations. "Omar's work, I assume?" she asked, keeping her voice steady. "Most likely, though we can't prove it." Khalid ran a hand through his usually immaculate hair, a rare sign of agitation. "I've already had calls from 3 business partners asking about the stability of our upcoming deals. Because they think your judgment is compromised by marrying me? Because they think I'm either hiding something or having some sort of personal crisis." He turned to face her fully. "This could affect everything I've built." Layla felt a familiar chill settle over her. "So what do you want to do about it?" Khalid hesitated, and in that hesitation she read volumes. Perhaps we should limit your public appearances for a while. Focus on your training within the palace." "Hide me away, you mean?" The words came out sharper than she intended. "Pretend I don't exist until the gossip dies down?" "It's not like that," he protested, but his eyes wouldn't quite meet hers. "Then what is it like, Khalid? Because from where I'm sitting, and yes, that's a wheelchair reference, it seems exactly like that." He moved closer, his expression conflicted. "Layla, you have to understand. My family's reputation, our business interests, are more important than my dignity? Than the progress we've made?" She wheeled herself backward slightly, creating distance between them. "Are you handled, what happened to the man who told me his brother valued courage over convenience?" The mention of Tariq made him flinch. "That's not fair." "None of this is fair," she replied quietly. "But I thought you, of all people, understood that life isn't about fairness. It's about how we handle the challenges we're given." Before he could respond, Amira appeared in the doorway, her expression troubled. "I'm sorry to interrupt, but there's something you both need to see." She handed Layla her phone, open to a different article. This one featured a photo of her, from before her accident, dancing on stage juxtaposed with a recent photo from the gala. The headline was even more sensational. "From Dancing Queen to Desert Princess, the truth behind Sheikh Al Fahim's unconventional choice." "They've dug into my past," Layla said softly, scrolling through the article. "Every detail of my accident, my financial struggles, even interviews with former dance colleagues speculating about my motivations." Khalid took the phone, his jaw tightening as he read. "This ends now. I'll have my legal team." "No," Layla interrupted firmly. "No legal teams, no hiding away, no damage control." "Then what do you suggest?" She straightened in her wheelchair, her mind racing. "I suggest we give them something else to talk about. Something that shows exactly who we are and what this marriage represents." "What do you mean?" "The International Business Forum is next week. Every major player in the region will be there. Instead of hiding me away, put me front and center. Let me help present your new accessibility initiative." Khalid stared at her. "That project isn't ready for public announcement." "Then let's make it ready. I've seen the proposals. They're good, but they could be great. Let me help refine them. Show everyone that I'm not just your wife, I'm an asset to your business and our community." "It's risky," he said, but she could see him considering it. "Everything worth doing is risky," she countered. "You taught me that, remember." A long moment passed as they looked at each other. Finally, Khalid turned to Amira. "Cancel my afternoon meetings. Layla and I have work to do." After Amira left, Khalid moved to his desk and began pulling up files. "If we're going to do this, we'll need to completely revamp the presentation. The current version doesn't adequately address—" "Khalid," Layla interrupted gently. He looked up and she continued, "Thank you for trusting me." Something softened in his expression. "Don't thank me yet. The next week is going to be intense." "I can handle intense," she smiled. "The question is, can you handle letting someone else help you for a change?" His reply was interrupted by a message notification on his phone. His expression darkened as he read it. "Omar is requesting a family meeting. He wants to discuss our situation." "Then we'd better make sure our presentation is perfect," Layla said firmly. Because this isn't just about proving something to the business world anymore, is it? No, Khalid agreed, his eyes meeting hers with new intensity. It's about much more than that. The International Business Forum's main hall was packed with the most influential business leaders from across the Middle East and Asia. Sunlight streamed through the vast windows of the Dubai World Trade Center, glinting off marble floors and crystal chandeliers. In a private preparation room, Layla adjusted her emerald green abaya, specially designed for this crucial presentation. The accessibility proposals are ready, Khalid said, handing her a tablet. Though I still think we should lead with the financial projections rather than the personal narrative. Numbers tell a story, Khalid, but people remember feelings, Layla replied, scanning through their presentation one last time. Trust me on this. The past week had been intense, with long days and longer nights spent refining their presentation. Working together had revealed new facets of their relationship. Khalid's surprising willingness to listen to her ideas, Layla's keen business instincts, and a growing synchronicity that neither of them had expected. A discreet knock at the door announced Omar's arrival. He entered with his usual smooth smile, though his eyes were cold. "Cousin, the board members are asking about the nature of today's announcement." "Well, you heard?" "Enough." He paused, then added, "You continue to surprise me, Layla. Is that a good thing?" Khalid was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Finally, he said, "I used to think surprises were a sign of poor planning. Now, I'm not so sure." When they reached the palace, Khalid insisted on accompanying her to the garden terrace, their usual spot for late-night conversations that had become more frequent over the weeks. The night air was cool, and the garden's fountains provided a peaceful backdrop. "There's something I should tell you," Khalid said suddenly, "Perhaps it would be better if Layla waited here while you—" "My wife and I will present together," Khalid interrupted firmly, "as planned." Omar's smile tightened. "Of course, I merely thought, given the recent publicity—" "The recent publicity you helped create?" Layla asked sweetly. "How thoughtful of you to be concerned." Before Omar could respond, Amira appeared in the doorway. "It's time." Khalid moved behind Layla's wheelchair, but she shook her head. "I can do this myself," she said softly. "We enter as equals." Something flickered in his eyes. Pride, perhaps, or something deeper. He nodded, moving to walk beside her instead. The main hall fell silent as they made their entrance. Layla could feel hundreds of eyes on them, some curious, some skeptical, some openly hostile. She caught sight of Hassan in the front row, watching with barely concealed interest. Khalid began the presentation with his usual commanding presence, outlining Al Fahim Enterprises' commitment to innovation and social responsibility. Then, with a subtle nod to Layla, he stepped aside. She wheeled herself to center stage, her voice clear and confident as she addressed the crowd in flawless Arabic. "Ladies and gentlemen, we're not here today to talk about charity or good publicity. We're here to discuss the future of business in our region, a future that can no longer afford to ignore the untapped potential of millions of people." Over. The next 30 minutes, Layla and Khalid tag-teamed their presentation, introducing their comprehensive initiative for making Dubai a leader in accessible business practices. They presented case studies, market research, and innovative architectural designs. But it was Layla's personal insights that captured the audience's attention. Her practical suggestions for workplace modifications, her vision for inclusive, luxury hospitality, her understanding of both the challenges and opportunities. "This isn't just about ramps and wider doorways," she concluded. "It's about recognizing that different perspectives lead to better solutions. It's about understanding that strength comes in many forms, and that sometimes our greatest limitations can lead to our greatest innovations." The applause was immediate and enthusiastic. Even Omar, standing at the back of the hall, looked somewhat stunned. Business leaders crowded forward, eager to discuss potential partnerships and implementations. Amid the chaos, Khalid pulled Layla aside to a quiet corner. "That was—" He paused, searching for words. "You were extraordinary." "We were extraordinary," she corrected him. "Together." His hand found hers, squeezing it gently. "Yes?" We were. The moment was interrupted by Hassan, who approached with a broad smile. Magnificent presentation, both of you, though I must say, Layla, you've exceeded all expectations. Thank you, Hassan, she replied, noting the knowing look he gave their still joined hands. As more people pressed forward to offer congratulations, Layla caught sight of Omar slipping out of the hall, his expression dark. She knew this success would only fuel his determination to undermine them, but for now she pushed that worry aside. Later that evening, during the celebratory dinner at the palace, Layla found herself observing Khalid as he discussed implementation plans with his executive team. There was a new energy about him, a lightness she hadn't seen before. Several times she caught him looking her way, his eyes soft with an emotion neither of them was ready to name. Amira, bringing Layla a cup of tea, followed her gaze. "You've done more than prove yourself today," she said quietly. "You've shown him a different way to be strong." "We've shown each other," Layla replied, thinking of how far they'd both come from that first video call. As the evening wound down, Khalid found her on their favorite garden terrace. The night air was cool, filled with the scent of jasmine and the gentle sound of fountains. "The board has unanimously approved the initiative," he said, sitting beside her. "Full funding, immediate implementation." "That's wonderful news." "Say it is," he agreed, then added softly, "though I find myself caring less about the board's approval and more about other things." Before Layla could ask what he meant, a servant appeared with an urgent message. Khalid's expression darkened as he read it. "What is it?" "Omar has called an emergency family council meeting for tomorrow morning. He's demanding to discuss the future of the Al Fahim family leadership." Layla felt her heart sink. Their triumph had been short-lived. "He's making his move." "Yes," Khalid said grimly. "And this time, he's bringing the entire family into it." The Al Fahim family's private council chamber was an imposing room, its walls lined with portraits of past patriarchs and intricate Islamic calligraphy. Layla sat beside Khalid at the massive wooden table, feeling the weight of generations of tradition pressing down on them. Around the table sat the family's most influential members, their expressions ranging from curiosity to barely concealed hostility. Omar stood at the head of the table, his voice carrying the practiced tone of someone who had carefully rehearsed his speech. "Honored family members, I've called this meeting out of deep concern for the future of the Al Fahim name. Recent events have raised serious questions about the direction of our family's leadership." "What recent events?" Aunt Jamila interrupted sharply. "The highly successful business forum presentation? The international praise for our progressive initiatives?" "Progressive," Omar's lip curled slightly. "Or reckless, this unconventional marriage, these radical changes to our business model, they threaten everything we've built. Our partners are questioning Khalid's judgment. Our conservative investors are expressing concern. Our stock price has risen 15% since yesterday's announcement," Layla pointed out quietly, her Arabic perfect and precise. Omar's eyes narrowed. "This isn't your place to speak." "On the contrary," Khalid's voice cut through the tension like steel. "As my wife and the co-presenter of our new initiative, this is exactly her place." "A wife of convenience," Omar shot back. "For have we forgotten the true nature of this arrangement?" A murmur went through the room. Layla felt Khalid stiffen beside her, but kept her own expression calm. She had been expecting this. "Tell them, cousin," Omar pressed. "Tell them about the wager with Hassan. Tell them how this marriage is nothing but a 3-month experiment, a game to prove you could transform an American outsider into someone acceptable to our society." The silence that followed was deafening. Layla could feel all eyes moving between her and Khalid, waiting for denial or confirmation. "Is this true?" Uncle Saeed, the eldest family member present, asked gravely. Khalid stood slowly, his voice steady. "Yes, there was a wager initially." He looked around the room, meeting each person's gaze. "But what began as a challenge has become something far more significant." "More significant?" Omar scoffed. "She's an outsider, a disabled woman, who has shown more strength, intelligence, and dignity than you could understand," Khalid interrupted, his voice sharp. "Who has helped secure our company's future, by showing us opportunities we were too blind to see, who has reminded me of values I had forgotten. He turned to look at Layla, and the emotion in his eyes made her breath catch. Values my brother Tariq tried to teach me before we lost him, about seeing beyond surface appearances, about measuring worth by character rather than circumstance, about the kind of leader and man I should be. Pretty words, Omar sneered, but they don't change the fact that this marriage is based on a lie. How can we trust your judgment in business when you've turned our family into a public spectacle? The only spectacle, Aunt Jamila spoke up, is your transparent attempt to undermine your cousin. We all see what this is really about, Omar. Uncle Saeed raised his hand for silence. Khalid, you admit this marriage began as a wager. What do you say now? Khalid looked at Layla, then back at his family. I say that sometimes we find our greatest truths in unexpected places. Yes, I made a wager, thinking I could transform someone else's life. Instead, Layla has transformed mine. She's shown me that real strength isn't about control or power, but about having the courage to change, to grow, to see beyond our own limitations. He reached for Layla's hand. The 3-month arrangement ends next week. The wager is irrelevant. Now because I'm asking Layla, in front of all of you, to stay. Not for any bet or business advantage, but because I've fallen in love with her. The room erupted in whispers. Omar's face darkened with fury, but before he could speak, Layla wheeled herself forward. Before anyone asks, she said clearly, yes, I knew about the wager from the beginning. Hassan told me everything. She looked around the room, her head held high. I came here for my own reasons, to prove something to myself, to create opportunities I couldn't find elsewhere. But like Khalid, I found something I wasn't looking for. She squeezed Khalid's hand. I found a partner who challenges me to be better, who sees me as whole and capable despite my wheelchair. I found a family business that could become a force for positive change. And yes, I found love, not because of any wager, but despite it. Uncle Saeed studied them both for a long moment. Omar claims our partners and investors are concerned, yet I've received calls all morning praising yesterday's presentation and requesting meetings to discuss the new initiatives. It seems to me that the only one truly concerned about this marriage is you, Omar. The family council's decision, he continued, looking around the table, is that Khalid's leadership has brought us not only profit, but progress. And in Layla, he has found a partner worthy of the Al-Fahim name, unless anyone objects. The room was silent. Even Omar, his plan backfiring spectacularly, could only clench his jaw in barely suppressed rage. As they left the council chamber, Khalid pulled Layla aside into a quiet alcove. I meant what I said in there, he said softly. About wanting you to stay, about loving you. Layla looked up at him, seeing not the controlled businessman she'd first met, but the man who had gradually let his walls down, who had learned to see beyond his own preconceptions, who had found the courage to change. I know, she replied, and I love you too. Their moment was interrupted by Hassan, who approached with a broad smile. I believe I owe you 2 million dinars, he said to Khalid. Keep it, Khalid replied, not taking his eyes off Layla. I've won something far more valuable. The gardens of the Al-Fahim Palace had been transformed into an enchanted wonderland for the evening's celebration. Twinkling lights hung from ancient olive trees, and the air was perfumed with jasmine and roses. The sound of traditional Arabic music mixed with modern melodies, creating a perfect blend of old and new, much like the couple the gathering was meant to honor. It had been 1 week since the dramatic family council meeting, and Khalid and Layla had decided to renew their vows, this time for real. The intimate ceremony would be followed by a grand reception that would show Dubai society exactly what their union truly meant. In Layla's suite, Amira helped adjust the stunning white gown that had been specially designed for the occasion. The dress incorporated traditional Arabic elements while accommodating her wheelchair beautifully, making it part of the overall elegant design rather than something to be hidden. Who would have thought, Amira mused, arranging Layla's veil, that what began as a wager would end like this. "Did you know," Layla asked suddenly, "about Hassan's real intentions?" Amira's knowing smile was answer enough. Hassan has known Khalid since they were boys. He saw how success and control had become a prison of Khalid's own making. He needed someone who could challenge him, who could show him a different kind of strength. And you thought I could be that person? I thought you might be. I knew for certain the day you corrected his Arabic pronunciation at breakfast, and he actually laughed instead of being offended. Amira stepped back to admire her handiwork. "You've changed him, you know. All of us have seen it." "We've changed each other," Layla replied softly, thinking of how far she'd come from that uncertain woman in Los Angeles. A knock at the door announced Hassan's arrival. He'd asked for the honor of escorting her to the ceremony, a request that had touched both Layla and Khalid deeply. "Ready to make history?" he asked with a warm smile. "History?" Layla raised an eyebrow. "Of course. Do you think it's a small thing, what you and Khalid have achieved? Look around you." He gestured to the window, where they could see guests arriving. Business leaders, social influencers, families with disabled members who never thought they'd see this kind of representation in our society. You've started something much bigger than a love story. As they made their way to the garden, Layla could see what he meant. The paths had been thoughtfully designed to be wheelchair accessible without looking institutional. Among the guests, she spotted several people with various disabilities, all moving comfortably through the space. Even more touching were the numerous young girls in wheelchairs, looking at her with shining eyes. The ceremony itself was everything their first wedding wasn't: genuine, joyous, and filled with love. Khalid's voice shook slightly as he recited his vows in both Arabic and English, promising not just love and fidelity, but partnership and growth. When he spoke of how she had taught him to see strength in vulnerability and power in acceptance, there wasn't a dry eye in the gathering. Layla's vows, delivered in flawless Arabic, spoke of bridges built between worlds and hearts, of finding love in unexpected places, and of the courage to be exactly who you are. When she talked about how Khalid had helped her see her wheelchair, not as a limitation, but as part of her journey to becoming who she was meant to be, she saw several of the young girls in the audience sit up straighter in their own chairs. During the reception, Omar made a brief appearance, offering a stiffly formal congratulation before departing early. His failed attempt to seize power had cost him significant standing in both family and business circles, though Khalid, in a gesture of grace that showed how much he'd grown, had chosen not to completely ostracize him. As the evening progressed, Khalid and Layla found a quiet moment alone near their favorite fountain. The sound of water provided a peaceful backdrop as they reflected on their journey. "Do you regret it?" Khalid asked softly. "Any of it? Even the way it began?" Layla considered for a moment. "No," she said finally. "Every step, every challenge brought us here. Even the difficult parts helped us grow into who we needed to be for each other. When Hassan first proposed that wager, I thought I would be the one transforming your life," Khalid admitted, taking her hand. "I never imagined how much you would transform mine." "We transformed each other," Layla corrected gently. "And we're not finished yet." Khalid's eyes lit with interest. "Oh?" "I've been thinking about expanding our accessibility initiative," she said, her eyes sparkling with excitement. "There's so much more we could do. Dance therapy programs for disabled, youth adaptive sports facilities, educational outreach." Khalid laughed, the sound full of joy and love. "Always thinking ahead, aren't you? Someone once told me that the best business leaders are the ones who can see possibilities others miss," she teased. "A very wise person, clearly," he smiled, leaning down to kiss her softly. Their moment was interrupted by the arrival of Aunt Jamila, who insisted they return to their guests. As they made their way back to the celebration, Layla caught sight of their reflection in one of the garden's decorative pools, her in her wheelchair, him walking beside her, both of them radiating happiness. They were an unconventional couple, by any standard, but they had proved that love, like strength, comes in many forms. The evening ended with a surprise announcement from Khalid: the establishment of the Tariq Al Fahim Foundation for Inclusive Innovation with Layla as its director. It would support initiatives promoting accessibility, education, and opportunities for people with disabilities throughout the Middle East. As applause filled the garden, Layla looked up at her husband, seeing in his eyes the same mix of love, pride, and excitement for the future that she felt in her heart. They had started as an experiment, a wager between friends, but they had become something far more powerful, a testament to the transformative power of love and acceptance, and a beacon of hope for others who dared to challenge society's expectations. 1 year later, the grand ballroom of the Burj Al Arab Hotel buzzed with anticipation. The first annual Inclusive Innovation Summit, organized by the Tariq Al Fahim Foundation, had drawn participants from around the world. The space had been thoughtfully designed to be accessible to all, with ramped stages, adjustable podiums, and state-of-the-art assistive technology available throughout. Layla sat in her wheelchair on the main stage, now completely at ease in her role as both a business leader and a member of Dubai's elite society. Beside her, Khalid watched with obvious pride as she delivered the opening address to the assembled crowd. "A year ago, I came to Dubai as part of what many might have considered an unusual arrangement," she began, her Arabic now so fluent that newcomers often assumed she had spoken it all her life. "I thought I was here to prove something, about capability, about worth, about what it means to belong. What I discovered was that the greatest transformations happen when we stop trying to prove ourselves to others and start believing in ourselves instead." The audience included familiar faces, Hassan in the front row beaming like a proud uncle, Amira, who had become one of Layla's closest friends and advisors, even Omar, whose initial hostility had gradually given way to a grudging respect, especially after the foundation's work had brought significant positive publicity to the family name. The Tariq Al Fahim Foundation, Layla continued, was born from a personal journey of transformation. But its mission extends far beyond any one story. In our first year, we've launched adaptive sports programs in 5 cities, established scholarship funds for disabled students, and partnered with major corporations to implement inclusive hiring practices. She gestured to a group of young women in the audience, all in wheelchairs or wearing professional attire. "These are our first class of business leadership trainees. In 6 months, they'll be taking positions in some of the region's top companies, proving that talent and capability come in many forms." As Layla spoke, Khalid found himself reflecting on how much had changed in the past year. The palace, once a symbol of traditional power, had become a hub for innovation and inclusion. Their marriage, which began as a wager, had grown into a partnership that challenged and inspired others. Even his own transformation from controlled businessman to passionate advocate for change sometimes amazed him. After the opening ceremony, during a brief break between sessions, Khalid and Layla retreated to a quiet corner of the hotel's garden terrace. The Dubai skyline sparkled before them, a fitting backdrop for their moment of reflection. "Do you ever think about that first video call?" Khalid asked, sitting beside her wheelchair in what had become their natural way of being together. "How different things were then." "You mean when you could barely look at my wheelchair and I thought you were an arrogant traditionalist?" Layla teased, her eyes twinkling. "I was an arrogant traditionalist," he admitted with a laugh. "You changed that. We changed each other," she corrected, a phrase that had become their shared truth. "Though I must say you've come a long way from the man who thought he could transform me in 3 months. In my defense, Hassan knew exactly what he was doing when he proposed that wager. He knew you would be the one doing the transforming." Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of their newest family member, a bright-eyed 7-year-old girl named Nadia, whom they had adopted 6 months ago. Like Layla, she used a wheelchair, and like Khalid, she had a determination that couldn't be deterred. She wheeled herself expertly between them, chattering excitedly about the young participants she'd met at the summit's youth program. "And, did you tell them about your dance classes?" Layla asked, smoothing Nadia's hair fondly. "Yes, they couldn't believe we have adaptive dance programs now. Can they come visit the Foundation Center?" "Of course they can, Habibti," Khalid replied, using the Arabic term of endearment that had become natural to him as a father. "That's exactly why we built it." As they made their way back to the summit, they passed Hassan, who was deep in conversation with some international investors. He paused to watch them, Khalid walking beside his wife and daughter, both in their wheelchairs, all three of them radiating a happiness that had nothing to do with society's expectations and everything to do with love and acceptance. "For your best investment yet?" Amira asked him quietly, following his gaze. "No investment at all, as it turns out," Hassan replied with a smile, just a little nudge toward what was always meant to be. The afternoon sessions of the summit focused on future initiatives, including the expansion of the Foundation's programs to other countries. As Layla and Khalid presented their vision together, their natural synchronicity evident in every word and gesture, the audience could see what true partnership looked like. Two people who had learned to value their differences, support each other's strengths, and face challenges together. Later that evening, in their favorite spot in the palace garden, Khalid, Layla, and Nadia sat together under the stars. The fountain's gentle sounds mixed with their daughter's laughter as she practiced the Arabic phrases she'd learned that day. "You know," Layla said softly, watching Nadia, "when I first came to Dubai, I thought I was taking a chance on changing my life. I never imagined I'd end up changing so many others." "That's the thing about transformation," Khalid replied, taking her hand. "Once it starts, you never know how far it will reach." As if to emphasize his point, Nadia wheeled herself closer, snuggling between them. "Can we have ice cream?" she asked in a mix of English and Arabic that had become their family's unique language. "What do you think, my love?" Khalid asked Layla, his eyes soft with happiness. "One more break from tradition?" "I think," Layla replied, smiling at their little family, "that breaking tradition is becoming our finest tradition of all." And there in the garden where their love had first begun to grow, surrounded by the life they had built together, they were proof that the greatest transformations happen not when we try to change others, but when we open our hearts to being changed ourselves.